At every trimester, there are moments of testing times to growing excitement for mothers-to-be. From the terrible morning sickness in the first trimester to the joyous first baby movements in the second trimester, right to the moment you finally hold your baby in your arms, marking the end of the third trimester and your pregnancy. We take a look at this wonderful journey and explore the hardships and joys encountered, so stay tuned to Women's AM. Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to Women's AM. It's the daily women's show made by women for women, and today promises to be another action-packed show for you sisters. We kick off the show, as always, with some interesting features and news stories in News Bites, and then following in our pregnancy series, we'll be discussing the second and third trimester in her views. And finally, we tackle a topic related to motherhood in the Mummy Diaries. So we have a lot to get through, and to help me navigate through this is our Women's AM panel. We have our Women's AM regulars, Sister Liz and Sister Nazia. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
How are you both doing today?
Good, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And of course we have our very special guest today, Sister Amara Sahel, who's an obstetrician and a gynecologist. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you doing, sister?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah, it's great to have you here. Now, sisters, we've got a little bit of an unusual thing going on here. I'm sure you can smell the wonderful scent of coffee, but this is a very unusual type of coffee. This is dandelion coffee. It's actually made from the root of dandelions, and I thought you might like to try it today. So Liz is having a sniff there. What do you make of it? It smells very much like coffee, doesn't it?
It does, actually. Yeah,
actually, dandelion
nice.
coffee is very, very good for you. It's good for your liver, and it helps promote healthy bacteria in your gut. So it's actually very good if you've got any digestive issues. So give it a go.
Caramelly, though.
Yeah.
I think it's quite caramelly.
I like it. It's just
very tasty.
There's a very nice flavor in it.
It's a good alternative, isn't
very
it?
pleasant,
And of course, it's caffeine-free, so you can have it, during pregnancy perhaps as well.
Yeah, good.
There we go. Well, I'll let you enjoy your dandelion coffee there. Let's move to our first segment of today. Let's go straight to News Bites. In this segment, the sisters take us through a selection of articles that caught their attention this morning. So, sisters, which articles have we got today?
Okay, I've got some interesting ones for you today. The first one's taken from the Telegraph. Won't somebody please spare a thought for the tired children of Britain? As Michael Gove pledges 10-hour school days, Ian Douglas isn't sure about long hours in primary schools. His children would speak out, but they're too sleepy.
Aww.
So basically, Michael Gove, Education Secretary, he's raised the possibility of increasing, making longer school hours for children and shorter holiday periods as well. So we're looking particularly here at the primary school section. What he's saying is that we need to combat the competition from Eastern countries such as Hong Kong and Singapore, who have longer days, as well as the fact that it would be an advantage for women who work full-time. So for me, I think this is where my issue comes in, that I think they do long days as it is, and to then increase those hours, I personally think that's very... I just don't think that's in the interests of the child, because, it's particularly the age group that you're looking at. I think it's just, they're so young, and to put them into this path where they're sort of being bombarded, and I know the suggestion is just to create extra activities outside of school, but you know what, principally in a child's mind, school is school. So even if you make those last few hours really exciting, it's still in their mindset that this is a school environment. And I think what I disagree with as well is that actually it's not pro-family either, because on the children, they need to have a relationship with their parents. And if they're finishing school at 6 o'clock, they're going to get home. By the time they have to go to bed, especially this age group, it's like 8 o'clock. So what hours, what are the hours there for family time?
Yeah,
it's virtually nothing. And it actually just reminded me because Ali radiallahu anhu, he actually said that he advised us to play with our children to the age of 7, to discipline and teach them from the age of 7 to 14 and befriend them at the age of 14. So it points to the fact that, for us, for Muslims, it's so important raising our children correctly, and in order to do that, we have to spend time with them. And this is actually taking us away from that opportunity. It's preventing us from forming bonds with them, establishing discipline. So I think, you know, there's a lot to be said about family time and protecting that.
Absolutely.
So,
a really interesting article
yeah.
there. Just to remind you, it is a live show and we'd love to hear your comments. You can call in live to the show. The number will be appearing on your screens throughout this segment. A really interesting article, Sister Nazia, and I totally agree. I mean, I used to work as a teacher, and I know when it gets to 3 o'clock, the kids, they just, you know, they're switched off by that stage, and they want to go home and just relax. And even for the teachers, extending that school day would affect them too, and there's already so much pressure on them. It really does make me wonder. Sister Liz, have you got some good news for us this morning?
Well, I've got some news for you, let's put it that way. This story comes from The Guardian, and it is actually quite interesting. The headline reads, "I'm a feminist and I've had cosmetic surgery. Why is that a problem?"
Okay.
Now, the reason I thought this was interesting, we've covered a few cosmetic surgery stories recently, and I thought this was interesting because it kind of offers a different perspective. It's a defending, you know, she's writing this article defending her actions, you know, under the stance of being a feminist, and I've made this as an informed decision, etc. You see, the problem that I have with it, reading through it, she doesn't really reconcile the, you know, ideologies of being a feminist with the decision that she made to have a facelift. There's a particularly telling sentence towards the end of the article that reads, "Condemning individuals for decisions they take to compete in a culture they themselves did not create is counterproductive and harmful, even if those decisions are ones that we regard as medically unnecessary and politically distasteful." So it's almost an admission that this decision was driven by pressures, you know, societal pressures. And then, you know, the last line talks about women supporting each other in our choices. I didn't really see where the choice was here. So, you know, I think it's an argument to defend it, but for me, I wasn't convinced.
Very, very interesting indeed. Nazia, talk us through your next story, inshallah.
Yeah, the next one is World Bulletin. The headline reads, "Women lead way for the first mosque for natives in Panama." I really like this story actually because for me, reading this, these two women who basically have been principally involved in setting up this mosque in Panama, and what to me is the whole spirit of women's involvement in something like this, because it's following the footsteps of Fatima al-Fahri. I know we talked about her last week, and also her sister Mariam. You know, Fatima was responsible for the Karaween Mosque in Fez. Mariam set up the Andalusian Masjid. And just reading up further into it, there's another sister, Haja Fatima, and she built one of the masjids in Singapore.
Incredible.
So we have this line of this tradition of women being involved in such a major community institution, if I can just call it that. I mean, in terms of when we look at society today, often when you see the masjid and women's role within that, it's so limited. You know, often you don't have a women's section in the mosques in terms of like the mosque committees. There isn't a division there. You also have sometimes some mosques that don't let women in or have facilities there for them. So
Absolutely.
it's one of those things that, you know, we know that the mosque is supposed to be a place, it's the heart of a community. It provides so much, you know, in terms of the community's needs. You know, it's a center of spiritual, social, educational, you know, provisions are dealt with there. And I think the thing that I really liked about it was the fact that, look, Ibn Umar narrated that the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, said, "Do not deprive women of their share of the masjids when they seek permission with you." So it just shows you the vital role the women can play within this side
And I
of...
think, you know, there's a growing population of converts in Panama, and I think it's, you know, amazing to see that they're taking the lead on this. And this mosque has, you know, actually been started by two sisters who converted to Islam, and it's a particularly interesting story for me because I've got family in Panama, and it's, you know, it's definitely going to benefit them as well. Alhamdulillah. Sister Liz, you've got a story on pregnancy which ties in quite nicely to our theme today, don't you?
Yeah, I do. It's a story from the Independent, and the headline reads, "Could drinking alcohol while pregnant be classified as a crime?" Now, the article talks about a particular case where a woman, despite being advised against it, continued to drink heavily throughout the pregnancy. When she had her daughter, she was born with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which can have physical, psychological and behavioural problems as the child grows up. The child was fostered, and there was a court case where criminal injury was stated as the cause of this, and this woman was obviously you know, charged in a criminal court. However, this ruling was overturned, but the council are trying to get this established as a crime. Now, I think this is interesting. It's quite a complex case, actually, but I think what's interesting about this is when we think about child protection issues, childcare issues, you know, this is obviously a huge, you know, a huge issue that as a society we're very concerned with in dealing with and tackling these problems. But why is this only when the child is born? I think any mother will verify that as soon as we find out we're pregnant, most of us feel that we become mothers from that point. You know, we start taking better care of ourselves, thinking about what we're eating, that kind of thing. So it kind of does beg the question that if you're not taking care of your child while it's, you know, still in the womb, you know, what kind of care will you be taking care of the child after they're born?
Well, absolutely. And we do have a caller on the line, so let's go to Abdurrahman, who's got a comment on this story. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Wa alaikum assalam, sis. Wa alaikum assalam.
Jazakallah khair for your call. Have you got a comment for us, inshallah?
Yeah, I was just kind of listening to Sister Liz, and I think the point that she made is actually the most important point out of this story that we can take away, that basically, you know, this idea that we have to protect our children from things like neglect, and obviously, you know, even part of that is probably alcohol abuse by the parents and things like that. But when the child is, you know, is actually still in the womb, these are all just thrown out the window. And if you think about it, it's the same idea behind the idea of abortion. When you go past the point of like 4 months, 5 months, it's allowed right up until 22 weeks, even though you can actually have, it's allowed up to 24 weeks, even though you can actually have a viable birth. I mean, it's not common, but you can have children that survive even though they're born at 22 weeks premature. So, you know, this idea of the rights of the child, you know, that it begins from birth, is so completely different to Islam if you think about it. From the moment the ruh goes in, the soul goes into that baby has rights over the parents. And, you know, just this whole idea of alcohol, you know, being allowed to whatever kind of limits they hope won't harm people, but it's always harming people. This is what they don't seem to understand. It's always going to harm people and families and society.
Jazakallah khair, sister. Some really interesting comments there from Abdurrahman. She made some really, you know, valid points there about alcohol and about the kind of dangers. Sister Nadia, talk us through your next article, inshallah.
The next one's taken from the BBC, how an aging population would change the world. So people across the world, what they're saying is that by 2050, the figures for the number of people who are 75 years and above will triple. And basically what's happening is this is going to alter the country's demographics and makeup. And what's happened is that this was a report conducted by Pew Research Center, and what they found was that they were shifting views regarding this. You know, that 87% Japanese believe that aging population will be a problem, whereas 26% only, you know, think that that would be the case. The issue concerned here is that what they're thinking is whose responsibility is it? Should it be the government, or is it the wider society that should be responsible? Because the fact of the matter is, it is going to be something that people need to deal with. Yes, although there is ways that the government can help, but I think this is something that we as a society, certainly as family members, should look into, because I think Islamically the principle, you know, we as family have a responsibility in terms of our aging population. You know, there's an ayah in the Quran that says, thy Lord has decreed that you worship none but him, and that you be kind to parents. And then it sort of goes on in terms of talking about how you treat them, and out of kindness lower to them the humility, the wing of humility. So it points to the fact that we have a responsibility to take care of them.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair for sharing those stories. As ever, a very interesting selection, and what a great way to start the show this morning. Well, we're off to a quick break.